Money buys happiness up to a point. The guy that made hundreds of millions, maybe $1 billion, that we pat on the back and ignore the fact that he has four ex wives and five kids that don't talk to him. We tell that person that they won the game.
And it was only a couple of years ago that you were working in investing.
All I was focusing on and measuring was money. I was drinking 6, 7 nights a week. My mental and physical health were starting to be in disarray. On the surface, it seemed like I was winning the game. We were living in California, living so far away from my parents. And I went out for a drink with this old friend. And he asked how often I saw them. I said about once a year. And he just looked at me and said, okay, so you're going to see your parents 15 more times before they die. Within 45 days, I had left my job. We had sold our house in California and we had moved 3,000 miles across the country to live closer to both of our sets of parents.
You have a beautiful quote in your book: if you do not change direction, you may end up where you are heading.
And make sure it is in alignment with where you want to be heading. Do that crazy thing that seems so silly because you never know when time is up. Would you trade lives with Warren Buffett? He can basically do whatever he wants, wherever he wants, whenever he wants. But you wouldn't trade lives with him for one very simple reason.
What's a change that you made in your life that has really changed the way that you live? Sahil Bloom, thank you for coming onto the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to start off by talking about a family friend that told you when you're at school to take a job in investing as you will get rich in a very short period of time. I think that's a really nice place to start our conversation.
Yeah, I got done. I was getting finished with my university education in, let's see, 2013. And I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I mean, I had spent, frankly, the first 21, 22 years of my life thinking that I was going to be a professional athlete. That dream got derailed by a shoulder injury. And suddenly I was kind of thrust into this future that was very uncertain. I didn't know what I wanted to go do with my life. And so the first thing I did was I went and talked to the financially richest people that I knew. Because my thought in my mind was basically like, money is going to equal the happy future that I want to go create. So let me go talk to those people, figure out what they do. And I had one teammate whose father was very successful in the world of investing. And he basically pitched the career track that he had followed, which was to go take a job in the world of investing and you'll make six figures straight out of school. And then in a few years, you'll be making over $500,000. And then a few years after that, you'll have more money than you know what to do with. And that sounded pretty good to me at the time based on this premise that money equals happiness. And I sort of just figured, oh, okay, that will solve all my problems. Let me go march down that path that he just laid out for me.
And what happened when you did?
Well, what I would say is that what you measure in life really matters. Meaning the things that you can measure and the things that you focus on, all of your actions tend to surround those things. And so if you exclusively measure your success in life on the basis of this one thing, making money, all of your actions will focus around optimizing for that one thing. So that's what I did. Like the first 5 to 7 years of my career, all I was focusing on and measuring was money. It was money, status, the accumulation of bonuses and promotions and titles and all of these things. So all of my actions focused on that one thing. And what happened to me, and what happens to many other people out there, is that you can win that one battle, but start losing the much bigger picture war. And that was the path I started marching down. I was doing very well in this one area of life, but all of the other areas of my life were starting to show cracks. Most importantly, my relationships. Yeah, I was making a lot of money, but my relationship with my parents was suffering. I was living 3,000 miles away, never really seeing them. My relationship with my sister had sort of ground to a halt, and my wife and I at the time were really struggling to conceive, which was creating strain in our life. I was drinking 6, 7 nights a week. My mental and physical health were starting to be in disarray. All at a time in my life where on the surface, it seemed like I was winning the game. Like I was doing the thing that you're supposed to want to do. And so by the end of 2020, it had come to a point in my life where I had this sensation that from the outside looking in, it was like I was winning the game. But I started to feel like if that was what winning felt like, I had to be playing the wrong game.
Mm. And so what did you do?
I did nothing at first. Quite frankly, I was a bit like the metaphor of the boiling frog, if you've ever
Mm.
heard of it. If you drop a frog into boiling water, it'll immediately jump out to save itself. But if you put a frog into a pot of warm water and slowly bring it to a boil, it'll stay in there until it dies. The idea is that slow, steady, incremental changes are very hard to notice.
Mm.
And so what happens is you stay in too long to your own demise. That was me. I was the boiling frog. And if not for this one conversation that I had with an old friend in May of 2021, I would have boiled myself to death, quite
Mm.
literally.
It,
And this one conversation happened in May of 2021. I went out for a drink with this old friend and we sat down and he asked how I was doing. And I admitted that it had started to get difficult living so far away from my parents, 3,000 miles away. They were on the East Coast. We were living in California at the time. And he asked how old they were. And I said mid 60s. And he asked how often I saw them. And I said about once a year at this point. And he just looked at me and said, "Okay, so you're going to see your parents 15 more times before they die." And I just remember feeling like I had been punched in the gut. The idea that the amount of time you have left with the people you care about most in the world is that finite and countable, that you can place it onto a few hands, that really had shaken me to the core. And in that moment, I realized that my entire definition of wealth, of what it meant to build a successful life, had been incomplete. That I was focusing on this one thing of money and status at the expense of everything else. That money was a part of building a good, wealthy life, but it was far from the only thing. And so, in the aftermath of that conversation, my wife and I took a dramatic action. I went home the next day. My wife and I had a conversation about what we wanted to build our life around, what our center really was. And within 45 days, I had left my job. We had sold our house in California and we had moved 3,000 miles across the country to live closer to both of our sets of parents. And in that one decision was a very important realization, which is that you are in much more control of your time than you think.
mm.
We had taken an action and fundamentally created time. Like that number 15 more times before my parents are gone, it's now in the hundreds. I see my parents multiple times a month. They're a huge part of my son, their grandson's life. We had taken an action and reassumed agency over our own lives, that we were capable of taking actions to create desired outcomes, to build our life around the things that we truly cared about. And that was really the spark that changed everything on my journey. It was the spark that led me on this journey to write this book, to share these ideas with the world, to recognize that you can build the life you want, not just the life you feel the world has handed you.
It's interesting when you tell your story because it's not that long ago. That's what shocks me. It was only a couple of years ago that you had that conversation. It was only a couple of years ago that you were working in that job. And you've made a huge transformation since then. But I think what people struggle with is change. And you're in a job that was earning millions of dollars. Uh, Most people would be very fearful to move out of that because they don't know if they'll be able to earn that money anywhere else, if they'd be able to earn money not within that sector, if making that change would allow them to have a better life. What was it that was within you that enabled you to make that change and be okay with it?
I don't think that it was something within me. And this should be an empowering thought to others out there because it was very much a byproduct of actions that I took rather than some innate courage. I don't consider myself a risk taker. I don't skydive. I don't like swimming in the ocean all that much. I'm not a super risky person. I don't have some tremendous feeling of courage. What I do is I deconstruct big problems into tiny little actions. And I'm very good at that. And I've always been good at that. And so, in the case of something like this, what you're talking about is a leap of faith in life. Making this big dramatic action, make a big change. And the reason leaps of faith are so scary is because you have a whole lot of information and evidence about your ability to live where you currently are. You know, you have the job, you can pay your bills, you know what it looks like. And you have no information or evidence about your life on the other side of that leap. You don't know that you can pay your bills. You don't know if you can take care of your people, meet your responsibilities. So, what happens is that gap, that's an asymmetry, if you will, that manifests as fear. That feels like this enormous expanse from where I am to where I want to be. And there's just a nothingness down below. The way that you solve that is by creating tiny little bits of evidence of your
Mm.
ability to live on the other side. That is not some insurmountable problem. That is 20, 30 minutes a day of doing some tiny thing today to start to build in your mind the confidence that I actually can build a life on the other side of that. It might not be the exact same in terms of how lucrative it is. It might be in a different place. It might be working in some different thing. But what can I do today to start creating that evidence? Well, if I'm trying to start a new business, maybe I'm going to do some research on what that business looks like. Maybe I'm going to set up a landing page. Maybe I'm going to try to get my first customer. Maybe I'm going to send a cold email. One tiny thing a day.
Mm.
If you do that for 30 days, I would be shocked if by the end of 30 days you didn't have some new evidence to suggest that it is possible. It might not be perfect evidence, but it is going to make that leap of faith feel less intimidating.
Mm.
I had done that over the course of a year without knowing it. I had been writing on the internet from about May of 2020 until May of 2021 because I really enjoyed writing. That had built up all of this evidence of people coming to me, wanting me to help them with their writing, wanting me to advise on things, invest in startups. All of these new opportunities were coming to me on the basis of this tiny action that I was doing daily. And that, when this conversation happened, gave me this sensation that this leap of faith actually wasn't that big of a leap, that I could kind of just go step over to the other side. And if it was terrible, and if I got into a whole lot of trouble, it's a two-way door. You can turn around and walk back and make the change in the other direction.
What if you're in a situation where you're forced out, where you have your dream job and suddenly, you get made redundant, or you're in a situation where change needs to occur, but you haven't been the one to take the step? In a sense, someone has forced you out of there. How do you get the confidence to move forward when you've been really shaken up?
Confidence is built, not born. Again, I think it comes down to the same principle. Like, you're not just born a confident person. I was actually very self-conscious. I was like really nervous public speaker for most of my life. I didn't have the confidence to look people in the eye. Like, I really lacked a lot of the things that you would say are traditional signs of confidence. When you meet me today, you wouldn't think that. That is because I've taken a whole lot of tiny actions on a daily basis to build that confidence, keeping promises to yourself on a daily basis to instill that level of confidence. The reason most people don't get there, especially when you have, a blow in life, like you get fired, you get laid off, you get made redundant, or your partner leaves you, or you're hit with an unfortunate family health situation, some blow in life. Those situations manifest as like this big wall in front of you. And the life you want is on the other side of this wall, but it's sitting in front of you, and you're just like, I can't imagine how I'm going to
Mm.
even get there. And the size of that challenge uh, stops you from taking any action in the present because it just feels so silly to do anything when I have this enormous task in
Mm.
front of me. It's like kind of standing at the base of a mountain, and you need to get to the top. You're like, I can't imagine getting to the top of
Mm.
that mountain. But you don't actually have to think about getting to the top of the mountain or getting to the other side of this wall. You just need to think about what is the one little step that I can take. The recognition overall on all of this is that small things become big things in life. And it doesn't actually take that long to see it. Like, if you can commit when you're down and out, if you can commit to 30 days of just showing up for 30 minutes a day, I call
Mm.
it like 30 for 30. 900 minutes of accumulated effort is what that'll give you. You will make dramatic progress in anything in 900 minutes. It doesn't matter what it is. You could learn a new language and get to like a tiny level of proficiency in 900 minutes. You could learn to code. You could, get better at writing. You could get into a workout habit. So many positive things can happen if you're just willing to commit to the tiny action on a daily basis. And that applies no matter what has hit you in life. The last thing I'll say here is one of my favorite movies is this movie, The Martian. It's Matt Damon. He gets stuck on Mars and he's trying to return home. The last scene of that movie, Matt Damon is talking about and teaching a class on how he returned home safely. And he's talking about the fact that there are going to be times when everything spirals on you. Like
Mm.
every life just feels like it's bearing down on you and you can't possibly see your way through to how you're going to get home. But you don't need to think about getting home. You just need to solve one problem. And then you can solve the next one, and then you can solve the next one. And if you solve enough problems, then you get to the other side. And I really love that as an idea for life because it is true that when we get hit with these massive blows in life, it's very easy to lose sight of the fact that
Mm.
all you need to do is just make one good decision. Just solve one tiny problem, and you'll be better off tomorrow than you are today.
Oh, I think that's the most beautiful advice. And I just want to say that myself have been in situations where it seems very overbearing, like, things aren't going right and things I had assumed would aren't. And what you said before, I have done, which is the tiny little things in the sense of a couple of emails, reaching out to people I may never have reached out before. And things come back, right, in a positive light. And it just gives you that confidence like, okay, I can move forward. I can move forward. This is going to be okay. And if you do take that time, even when it feels so heavy, as you said, to just make those slight changes in your life to move you slightly forward, then the path will open up even if it seems unbearable. So thank you for that wisdom because I have used it in my life and I can say that it totally works. Your grandmother had a beautiful line that she said to you that you write about in your book, The Five Types of Wealth. Never fear sadness as it tends to sit right next to love. Can you talk to us about that?
My grandmother was an amazing, amazing woman. She passed away, unfortunately, in October 2023, but was basically a constant source of incredible wisdom and clarity in all of our lives, an incredible storyteller. That line, never fear sadness as it tends to sit right next to love, is such a beautiful metaphor for
Mm.
life because it is much more powerful than just being about love. It is a recognition that the most beautiful things in life dance on this razor's edge where the good comes in the same kit as the bad. And you cannot hope to benefit from and experience the good without exposing yourself to the bad, to the other side of that razor's edge. And when it comes to love, it's so true. We've experienced that. You cannot hope to experience the joys of love, of true, deep, painful, powerful love without exposing yourself to the pain of loss of that love. And if you aren't willing to expose yourself to the pain, then you're not going to ever experience the true depths of love on the other side. That applies to everything. I see it all around me now. Like you can't hope to get the gains that you want in your business, in your health, in your relationships, in any of these areas if you're not willing to expose yourself to the struggle, to the challenge that sits on the other side of it. And I just think that more people would benefit from really embracing and immersing
Mm.
themselves in that idea.
I want to talk about the different pillars that you have for the five types of wealth. One being time, the other being social, and these are in order. The third one being mental, the fourth one physical, and interestingly enough, the fifth one financial. And why I say interestingly enough is because what we were talking earlier about is most people put financial as number one. And I wanted to get onto the financial one first because I think that is actually the most important for people to hear about financial wealth. And you say it so beautifully when you talk about the I'll be happy when, right? I'll be happy when the future arrives. And then I've done it again in my own life. I remember I really wanted to do a certain thing. And then I got there and I was like, well, it's not really feeling how I thought it would. Okay, got to get to the next thing and the next thing. And you feel like you never arrive. I actually remember talking to Matthew McConaughey about this on the podcast, and I can hear his voice saying, like, when do you arrive? You never arrive, right? Like, there is no arrival. And
Mhm.
I'd like you to talk to us a little bit about the idea of financial wealth and why, there's a certain baseline for it too, and that needs to be covered because, someone that's living in the stress of poverty is not going to be happy either. So, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so let's start with the basics here. Money does buy happiness. Anyone that tells you that money doesn't buy happiness is lying. The science is very clear on this. Money buys happiness up to a point.
Mm.
And it is a very clear, basically linear relationship where incremental units of money equal incremental units of happiness. You've probably experienced that in your life to some extent if you're listening to this. Early in your life, as you come up the income curve, it directly buys happiness because you're able to reduce fundamental burdens and stresses. You can take care of the people around you. You can provide for your basic needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Food, security, shelter, all of those things. The early in life gains are really important. That being said, what typically happens to people is that in those early years, we condition our minds to believe that an incremental unit of money equals an incremental unit of happiness. This simple pattern in our mind gets formed because it's true. But then all of a sudden, at some point, as you continue up the curve, it's no longer true. It levels off. The money does not directly buy the same incremental unit of happiness. But that early in life conditioning has remained. So, what happens to a lot of people is they continue to chase money, thinking that it is going to lead to the happiness that it previously did when it no longer does. These other areas of life are going to be what contribute. It's going to be your relationships. It's going to be your free time and freedom. It's going to be your health. It's going to be your purpose, these other things. But if you continue chasing money thinking it's going to be the thing, if you continue chasing money as the goal, if you will, you are going to drive yourself off a cliff. That
Mm.
is the land of the rich yet miserable person that we all know. We've all met the rich yet
Yes.
miserable person, right? We don't have to look very far to find examples of them. Um, that is what I talk about in my book and in all of my work as the Pyrrhic victory. It's the idea of a victory that comes at such a steep cost to the victor that it might as well have been a defeat. The battle won of winning this battle of making a lot of money, but the war of a good life lost. We don't have to look far to find examples of that. It's the person, the guy that made hundreds of millions, maybe $1 billion, that we pat on the back and celebrate and admire and ignore the fact that he has 4 ex-wives and 5 kids that don't talk to him. And we tell that person that they won the game. And I will just say that my entire life changed when I realized that that was not a game that I cared to win. That most of the people that I read books about, I would never trade lives with. All of that circles in on this one fundamental idea, which is money has to be a tool, but not the goal. Money is a tool to build these other types of wealth. And as you continue to chase and go and build things, you want to focus on these other areas once you have gotten past those baseline years, the baseline needs, and once those have been met.
That is a really interesting, you know, interesting wisdom that you say. And it's funny because there are certain people I know who have a lot of money, and I find that all they talk about is the next holiday. When they're on holidays, they talk about the next holiday. When they're not on holidays, they talk about the next holiday. And I remember someone saying to me once, a very wealthy business lady, I had her on this podcast, and she said to me, I made millions doing what I've done, and my anxiety was so bad. And I would sit, in the French Riviera or wherever it was in beautiful spots, the Greek islands, and I was so unhappy there. But I was covering it up by moving to the next holiday and the next destination. And I see that in a lot of people where it's like they've got nothing to talk about except what's your next holiday? What do it's like what about just here and now, right? Holidays are wonderful. We all love them. But if that's the only thing that you're living for, then there must be something wrong with that. And I wanted to read this parable that you put in your book because it was so beautiful, and I think people get a lot out of it. It says there was a it takes a couple of minutes. A wealthy investment banker goes on vacation to a tropical fishing village. As he walks along the docks one afternoon, he comes upon a small, rundown fishing boat with several large fish on its deck. And the man says, "How long did it take you to catch those fish?" He asks. The fisherman looks up from his work and smiles at his new visitor. "Only a little while." And the investment banker is taken aback by his response. He likes the fisherman and wants to help. And he says, "Why don't you fish for longer so you can catch more fish?" And the fisherman shrugs and explains to his new friend that he has all he needs each day. "I sleep late, I fish a little, I spend time with my children and beautiful wife. In the evening, I go into town, I drink wine, I play the guitar, and I sing, and I laugh with my friends." And the investment banker is puzzled because he wants to help his new friend, who, in his opinion, is clearly confused. The investment banker has helped many businesses and has an MBA and other fancy credentials to his name. So he lays out a plan for the fisherman. He says, "First, you spend more time fishing so you can catch and sell more fish. You use the proceeds to buy a bigger boat, which allows you to catch and sell even more fish. And then you buy a fleet of boats. You hire a team, vertically integrate. And as the CEO of a large growing enterprise, you could move to the big city, you would take your company public, and you'd make millions." And the fisherman looks confused but smiles at the man and says, "And then what?" he asks. And the investment banker laughs at the silly question and says, "Well, then you could retire to a quiet town. You could sleep late, fish a little, and spend time with your children and beautiful wife. In the evening, you could go into town and drink wine and play the guitar and sing and laugh with your friends." The fisherman smiles broadly, thanks his new friend for the advice, and wanders off slowly in the warm afternoon sun. And that really says it all, doesn't it?
It is such a beautiful story because the common interpretation of it is that the banker is wrong and the fisherman is right. But I actually think it's more nuanced than that. It is about the fact that the two have a fundamentally different definition of what it means to have enough.
Mm.
It is perfectly okay and reasonable for the banker's definition of enough to be about building something big, going and chasing this grand ambition, creating a bunch of jobs, doing all of these big, bold things. But for him to apply that map of reality to the fisherman's terrain makes no sense because the fisherman is already living his definition of enough. And yet, that is what we do on a daily basis when we take out our phones and we scroll through the lives of other people on social media. We allow other people's maps of reality to impact how we feel about our terrain. The antidote to that misery that we feel when we're constantly comparing our lives to other people, that feeling of FOMO that we need to go chase all these things, that we need to do the keeping up with the Joneses, the antidote to that is to get very clear on what it means to you to have enough. The recognition here is that your expectations are your single greatest financial liability. If your expectations rise faster than your assets, you will never feel wealthy. You'll never feel rich. We need to get clear on what enough looks like to us. It is not about it being Spartan or bare. It could be that you have multiple houses in your enough life because you love bringing people together to create amazing experiences. It may be that you get to travel. It may be that you have a cabin. Whatever that looks like, we need to get very clear on what the life is that we are actually trying to build. What does enough really mean to you? Where are you? What are you doing? How are you living? What are you thinking about? What are you working on? Who are you with? All of these things, really understanding and visualizing what the money is for. What are we working towards? What is the life I'm trying to build? Because in the absence of that clarity, you just chase whatever more the world tells you you should want.
How did you do that in your own life?
Through a very clear visualization exercise. I mean, we sat down, my wife and I, and got extremely clear and vivid about what the life was that we actually wanted. Because the science on this is actually quite clear that numbers, if I ask you what your definition is of enough, what does enough mean to you? Most people, like probably 99% of people, will just come up with some number off the top of their head. They'll say like $1 million or $3 million or $5 million or whatever they'll say. And what we know about the numbers is that the numbers have a tendency to disappear and reappear on the horizon. We get close to that number, and then all of a sudden it becomes 3x that number. Michael Norton, this Harvard Business School professor, actually did a study on this. He asked a bunch of high net worth individuals how happy they were on a scale of 1 to 10. Then he asked them how much more money they would need to be at a 10. And across the board, whether they were worth $1 million or $100 million plus, they all said they needed 2 to 3 times as much money to be at a 10 happiness. It makes no sense. Like there should just be a happiness number where all of a sudden they're all at a 10, but it doesn't work that way. Numbers disappear and reappear on the horizon. The life that you want to build, a clear picture of the life you want to build, doesn't do that same disappearing act. So for my wife and I, what we wanted to do was sit down and answer those questions. Where were we living? What did we have? What did we have in savings? What were we able to do? How much travel? What did our house look like? Who were we surrounded by? What were we working on? What were we thinking about? Those are the questions that govern the life you are actually trying to build. And once you're clear on the life you're trying to build, then you can take action to go and build towards it. Then you don't feel the pressure from a million other people telling you the life you should want because you've already gotten clear on the life that you do want.
Mm. I find that really interesting as well because I think, as you said, we are always chasing the next big thing. So what you've said makes a lot of sense if we have clarity around what we want rather than what other people want. And I want to talk about now another form of wealth that you talk about in your book, which is time wealth. And you say there are so many points in your life where you felt so consumed by work that you didn't know, you weren't spending time with your family and you didn't have the fulfillment. You touched on this at the beginning that you wished you did. And I have felt that in my own life where I was just working, and next minute, I know that you have a young child, but for me, my children are young, but not as young as yours, where next minute you realize they've grown up and you've missed half of it, right? So talk to us about time wealth and why that is so important.
Time wealth is fundamentally about freedom to choose how you spend your time, who you spend it with, where you spend it, when you trade it for other things. It's about an awareness of time as your most precious asset, the one thing that you can't get back, no matter how hard you try. Time wealth is about realizing that all of the things that we take for granted today are things that our older self will wish we could go back and do. There are all of these things that we're just buzzing through in the moment, waiting for the next vacation, waiting for the next financial milestone, saying those statements of, if I get X, then I'll be happy. If I get this, then I'll be happy. We're making our own success and happiness and wealth in life conditional on achieving some things. And in that pursuit, we are losing sight of what we have in the present. We're losing sight of that one most precious asset of time. I often ask young people a simple question about this. Would you trade lives with Warren Buffett? He's worth $130 billion. He has access to absolutely anyone in the world. He reads and learns for a living. He flies around on a private jet. He can basically do whatever he wants, wherever he wants, whenever he wants. But you wouldn't trade lives with him for one very simple reason, which is that he's 95 years old. There's no way you would agree to trade the amount of time that he has left for all of that money. And on the flip side, he would give anything to be in your shoes, to have the amount of time that you have left. He would give up every single dollar. So with one very simple question, you've acknowledged that your time has quite literally incalculable value. And yet, on a daily basis, how much of that time are we all really wasting?
Mm.
Spent scrolling on our phones, comparing our lives to other people, worrying about the past, stressing about the future, fundamentally disregarding this one most precious asset that we really have. So, the call to action is to create that awareness at the top of your mind, to recognize that time is the one currency that truly matters at the end of the day, and to be just as deliberate in how you allocate your time, your energy, as we are with our finances.
Mm. You spoke to a lot of people when you were doing this book, a lot of them elderly, to gain wisdom from them. Can you tell us a few things that they said to you?
Yeah, that was such an interesting pursuit. So I went and tried to find people, 90 and 100-year-olds, really, to ask them what advice they would give to their younger selves. My grandmother's words that we shared earlier were one piece of wisdom that came from that: never fear sadness, as it tends to sit right next to love. One of my other favorites was treat your body like a house you're going to have to live in for the next 70 years. I absolutely love that one,
Mm.
because that is all about this idea that your daily actions today create your future. He was applying it to physical wealth, to the domain of thinking about the daily physical actions that you're doing, building this house that you're going to have to live in. But really, that applies broadly to any area of your life. You are always building your house with your actions. That house could be your relationships, and the actions that you're taking on a daily basis build that relationship house. It could be your career, it could be your purpose, any of these areas of life. You are building that house. So, are you taking actions on a daily basis to create a stable, solid foundation? Are you making those minor repairs along the way to avoid the major repairs later on? That is just such a powerful insight for life.
Mm. What was some of the other ones that you heard?
A few of my other favorites. One was to uh, never miss a chance to use the fancy china or drink the good wine. I always loved that one because it is true. Again, like, we always say these things that we're saving things for later. You're
Yeah.
like, oh no, like that's a good bottle. I'm not going to drink that tonight, or that's the good china, so I'm not going to use that tonight. And at the end of the day, later just becomes another word for never. You never end up drinking that bottle of wine. And so why not just drink it? Like, when we're young and when we're here and when we're with the people we love, just drink the good bottle of wine.
Mm.
Use the fancy china, like, go out and dance in the rain, do that crazy thing that seems so silly, because you never know when time is up. But
Mm.
again, all of these things that we take for granted today are going to be things that our older self wishes we could go back and do.
Mm.
There's this philosopher, Sam Harris, who I talk about in the book, has this idea of the last time, like this idea that there will come a moment when it is the last time that you get to do all of these things. Like, there will be a last time you get to go on that walk with your parents. Last time your child will ask you to tuck them into bed at night. A last time they'll want to hold your hand walking to school. A last time you'll get to get that group of friends together for the annual trip or go on that walk with your sibling. All of those things are so easy to take for granted in the moment. If you don't pause to appreciate them, if you don't slow yourself down, appreciate the time wealth that you really have.
Mm. That's beautiful. There is a pillar that you talk about, which is mental wealth. Why is that important? And can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah, mental wealth is fundamentally about, like, the hero's journey. This is sort of a tale as old as time. The hero leaves the confines and the safety of home to go off on this grand, bold, ambitious journey. Ventures out into the wilderness and has all of these struggles, trials, and tribulations, battles, and then comes back a changed person, has learned and grown through the experience. That is really what a life of mental wealth is about. It is about carving your own hero's journey. And it doesn't matter, importantly, whether it is grand or ambitious or special to anyone else. It just has to be yours, your own hero's journey, the one that you have made for yourself. Mental wealth really comes down to these three pillars that I talk about of purpose, growth, and space. Purpose is about something that aligns your short term actions and your long term priorities, something that creates meaning on a daily basis in your life. Growth is about being a changing creature, recognizing that you are capable of changing and adapting as you continue to come up in your own life. And then space is about pausing and slowing down enough so that you can see the bigger picture, so that you can zoom out, create perspective in your own life, and approach decisions with the maximum amount of clarity and consciousness. If you are able to kind of build your life around those three pillars, around this idea of mental wealth, you experience a real life of abundance.
How have you used that in your life?
The biggest way for me has been through creating real rituals for space. Like, I think that the other two, purpose and growth, are really a byproduct of your ability to create space. What I mean by space is this idea that uh, your whole life is typically this fixed loop of stimulus and response. There are all these things happening to you, that's stimulus, and then you are responding to those. We live in this kind of urgency culture where we think that everything needs to be getting
Mm.
responded to immediately. So thing comes in, you have to immediately respond. You never zoom out or slow down enough to create the space to really evaluate and see the bigger picture. Creating that space is how you unlock your full power in life, because the space allows you to see the much bigger picture trajectory of where you're headed. Are you headed in the direction of the life that you're trying to build, or are you veering off course? And once you can create that perspective, you can start to see it and take action to adjust course to make sure that you're on that right trajectory. So I do that on a monthly basis. I create an actual calendar forced zoom out. I call it my think day, where for an hour or 2 hours, I will slow down, pause, and just reflect, just zoom out and ask some of these bigger picture questions about my life to make sure that I am on the course that I really do want to be on.
How do you deal with hiccups that come along the road? So, say, you're doing the work that you're doing and you love it, and you feel a lot of contentment, people are getting a lot out of it. And then you write a book, for example, and the sales aren't very good, or you have a situation where something you're doing doesn't work out. How do you know to keep going? And when do you know to hang up the boots?
I think it's important to separate and sort of distance yourself to some extent from outcomes versus the inputs. And what I mean by that is we all know to focus on the inputs in life. Like that has kind of become a common cliche. I'm just going to focus on the inputs, the things that I can do. And that's only partially good advice. And the reason it's only partially good advice is because at the end of the day, the world judges you for your outputs. No one cares if you worked hard or tried hard on the book you wrote if it's a crappy book. Like you could put tons of time in and all this effort and energy and all of these things, and if the book's bad, the book's bad. I was having a conversation with Adam Grant once, the
Ah,
professor and author, and he talks about how he was like grading papers for one of his courses, and he handed out the papers with the grades, and a student came and said, "Oh, I don't feel like my grade for the class really adequately captures the effort that I put into the class." And his response was, "I'm not grading for effort. I'm grading for the output, for the results, what you created. And so it doesn't really matter if you feel good about your effort that you put in." And it's kind of a funny story, but it's really true in
mm,
life. Like we do need to focus on our inputs in the days, but we need to be able to zoom out enough to say, well, if the outcomes are dislocated from the inputs that I put in, then I probably need to adjust my inputs to some extent. They may not always be perfectly aligned in the short term, but in the long term, if I'm putting in really good, earnest effort, that should lead to positive growing outcomes. And if it's not, that probably means I need to adjust the inputs that I was putting in. I need to adjust course in some way. Maybe that's working on a different thing. Maybe that's doing it slightly differently, approaching it differently. So I really try to create systems to do that in my own life, to say, like, yes, I'm going to continue putting in effort in the days, but if on a quarterly basis, I zoom out and look and say, hey, that wasn't really contributing to the outcomes that we wanted as a team, we should probably adjust the way that we're approaching it. I don't want to just pound my head into the wall. That's not my goal. I want to break through the wall. And so if my head pounding is not really budging the wall, we should probably adjust where I'm hitting my head or how I'm doing it.
Great advice. You have a beautiful line in the book that says, life is about direction, not speed. Can you talk to us about that? Because it goes into what you say about goals and anti-goals.
So my parents got me this compass
Mm.
for my birthday one year, and inside the compass was just inscribed a message that said, "Sahil, so you may always know where your true north lies." That message was about that idea that life is about direction, not speed. It's much better to climb slowly up the right mountain than it is to climb fast up the wrong one. The way that that ties to goals and anti goals is to say, we all know goals. That is the mountain that you're trying to climb. It's the summit of the mountain. You set the goal and you're going to go start climbing there. But that's not quite enough when we're talking about building our life. Because what can happen is as you climb that mountain that you've set out as your goal, you can lose your toes or your nose along the way to frostbite. You could come across some terrible mountain lions and bears along the way. There could be all sorts of calamities that befall you as you go to achieve this goal. Maybe you get to the top and you die at the top because you haven't made a plan to come back down. There are all sorts of things that happen in your pursuit of these goals. Anti goals are the things that you don't want to happen as you go and achieve your goals. Setting both goals and anti goals is how you create guardrails around your pursuit of the goal. It means that you can go and climb that mountain and go do the thing you want, march in the direction of your dream, but avoid these bad outcomes along the way. It's what allows you to win the battle and the war. So, an example would be, let's say I want to become CEO of the company. That's my goal. I'm going to go set that as my big ambitious goal that I want to go and achieve. My anti goals associated with that goal might be not spending 300 nights out of the year away from my family and losing my health to all of the travel and dining out and drinking that comes with it. I want to achieve my goal of becoming CEO, but not if it means being away from my family all the time and having my stress and health get completely deteriorated. Now I have clear guardrails to my pursuit of this goal. So on an ongoing basis, I can adjust course. If I'm marching towards becoming CEO, but I start to feel like I'm running afoul of one of those anti goals, I can make slight adjustments along the way. I've created clear boundaries and guardrails to my pursuit of this goal that will allow me to win the battle and the much bigger picture war.
You sound like you have, in your life, a lot of things that you review and look at, which is amazing. And I wonder, out of everything that you do, all the tools that you use, what's a change that you made in your life from where you started 2020 conversation, 2021 with your friend, that has really changed the way that you live?
I'm going to give you a really simple one because I think this is one that anyone can put into place tonight. As soon as they listen to this, that will have a dramatic impact on your life. It is what I call my 1-1-1 method. At the end of every night, before you go to bed, take out a blank sheet of paper and write down one win from the day. That's something that you felt good about. One point of stress, tension, or anxiety. That's something that you want to get off your head and onto the paper. And then one point of gratitude, something that you felt grateful for during the day, big or small. It takes 2 to 3 minutes to write down those three things. And it has a dramatic impact on your peace of mind as you end the day. Creates immediate clarity, sense of calm, allows you to fall asleep faster. Huge positive for both your physical health and sleeping better and your mental health in feeling that calm to end the day. That has had a dramatic impact on my life. I mean, I used to be the type of person who would get into bed, mind racing, unable to slow down, unable to fall asleep. It has had a huge positive impact on my journey.
Physical wealth is one of the pillars that you talk about, and you just mentioned it then. And obviously, sleep would be a big part of that. We know that when we don't sleep, that a lot of things crumble, especially with our mental health as well as our physical health. Can you talk to us a bit about what you learned in regards to physical health being a pillar?
Yeah, it has ripple effects into every other area of life. That is why I think it is so important. It is very difficult to enjoy any of the other types of wealth if you are not physically well. And there are, no matter where you are on your journey, no matter how healthy or unhealthy you are today, there are simple, controllable actions that we can all take to start to make progress in this domain. And generally speaking, they are freely accessible to anybody. You don't need to invest in some expensive, crazy movement routines, nutrition protocols, fancy recovery. You can do the boring basics and be ahead of 80 or 90% of people. That's move your body for 30 minutes a day. It doesn't matter what type of movement, walking, hiking, biking, jogging, running, rowing, dancing, whatever you like doing, move for 30 minutes a day. Eat whole, unprocessed foods for about 80% of your meals. That's 17 out of 21 meals during the week. And then try to sleep for 7 hours a night. If you can do those three things, science shows you will be ahead of 80, 90% of people, and you will be well on your way to building and investing in a life of physical wealth.
Robin Sharma, who I've interviewed a few times, has a beautiful quote when it comes to health, and it's that health is the crown on the well person's head that only the sick person can see. And I think about it a lot because I think that we don't think about our health a lot till it's not there anymore. And when people lose their health, that's all that they want back, right? And we don't have gratitude enough for the health that we have. And I think it's something that we should think about more often, and how lucky we are to, have good health in our lives.
Yeah, a healthy man wants many things, a sick man only wants one thing.
It's so potent and so true. I wonder, when you wrote your book, The 5 Types of Wealth, what was something within the research that you did that really stuck out to you about what you found?
I think that the role of relationships was probably the most striking new information to me. I always knew that relationships were important, but this idea of social wealth and of relationships really being the single greatest investment in terms of their return on your overall life was so powerful because the science was really building right as I was writing the book. There was this study, the Harvard study of adult development, done over the course of 85 years. They followed the lives of about 2,000 individuals. They found that the single greatest predictor of physical health at age 80 was relationship satisfaction at age 50. It wasn't blood pressure, cholesterol levels, smoking, or drinking habits. It was how you felt about your relationships that determined how well you aged. And yet, relationships are typically the first thing that fall by the wayside when we get busy in life. It's the first thing that we forget to invest in. We stop sending the text to the friend. We stop getting the group of friends together. We don't call our mom. We don't do those simple, tiny daily actions and investments when in reality, the science is very clear that it is going to be the thing that really contributes towards living the good life that we are all trying to build. That was mind blowing to me
Mm.
as I thought about what it means to build a wealthy life and just how important it is for us to prioritize those things on a day to day basis.
I agree. I think having, good romantic relationships, good family relationships, good friend relationships is so important. And it's interesting, I know for myself that there are times when I felt down is when I don't realize that I haven't had much contact with people throughout the day. And I work for myself, and sometimes, the contact is a lot of like email or things like that. And I'll find like at the end of the day, I feel not as happy. And I'm like, you know what? I haven't really actually had contact with anyone today. And especially, I remember when 2 of my best friends who I speak to like most days went away. I was like, God, I really miss the void of just talking to them. And I think what you're saying about relationships is so true. If we have the right ones, it really makes us so happy to have the right people around us. There was an interesting study that I found when I wrote my book, which was when people were faced, say, with a hill, like literally a hill, if they had someone next to them, they didn't look at the hill as being as steep to walk up than if they were by themselves. And I think that really just shows why having good people around us that we care for, that care for us, is so, so important.
Wow. That is a really interesting one. I got to find that. That's such an interesting idea.
Yeah. I wonder for you, what is some of the greatest advice that you have ever been given?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to be around a lot of very wise people. I mentioned my grandmother and her advice. My grandfather had an amazing piece of advice that he shared, which is that you'll achieve much more by being consistently reliable than by being occasionally extraordinary.
Hmm.
I've always loved that as an idea of just showing up being the key to life. Like, it is very hard to bet against the person who just keeps showing up.
Mm.
And so much of what we are fed and told is that we need to be extraordinary. We need these glimpses of excellence. When in reality, a lot of success in life is just being willing to show up when nobody's watching.
What is something that you wish for yourself?
Oh, that's an interesting question. What is something that I wish for myself? I wish that I continue to have the ability to balance a desire to create impact on a global scale with the presence to live in the moment with my son and with any future children that we have. Not allow one to pull me away from the other, and to kind of live in that tension and in that balance.
Do you have a favorite prayer or saying or mantra?
My favorite quote, I suppose, captures all of those, which is a quote from Rumi, the ancient
Mm.
poet, who said, "As you start to walk on the way appears. Clarity comes from action."
That's so beautiful. And it really kind of highlights everything that we've been talking about today. You have a beautiful quote in your book by Lao Tzu: "If you do not change direction, you may end up where you are heading." I love that too.
One of my absolute favorites, and it's very true. Um, we often don't take time to think about where we are heading, which is
Mm,
why I say the power of space is so important, because you get a clear perspective on where is it that I'm heading, and
mm,
do I need to change direction? Do I need to adjust course? For me, it was that one conversation with that friend that forced me to see where I was heading and that I didn't like it and I needed to make a change. But for anyone out there listening, make sure you take stock of where you are heading and make sure it is in alignment with where you want to be heading. And if it's not, you can take action to change that.
mm. That's so true. And our final question: what is a life of greatness to you?
A life of greatness to me is keeping my promises to myself. I think that it's very easy to look outward when we talk about greatness. To me, greatness is about keeping your word to yourself. The things that you say you're going to do, you go out and do those in the world.
Sahil Bloom, thank you so much for the conversation today. Your book, The Five Types of Wealth, it is such a wonderful read, honestly. I know for myself I got a lot out of it. So thank you so much for writing it, and thank you for today.
Thank you so much for having me.